Good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Faye D'Souza. This is the YouTube channel where we attempt to give you perhaps news without any bias, any opinion, any outrage. The idea is to bring you the information and bring you the voices and give you a sense of what is going on. This evening, we're going to have a conversation with Mr. Yashwant Sinha. A quick update for those of you who need any reminding at all. Mr. Sinha served as Finance Minister, External Affairs Minister. He was a bureaucrat in the state of Bihar, a senior leader of the BJP. He exited the BJP a few years ago and has also been a very vocal critic of the party. In what came as a surprise to many people over the weekend, he formally joined the Trinamool Congress before the West Bengal elections. He has spoken to the press since then and maybe given his reasons for why he's joined the TMC, but other than talking about his sort of re-entry into active politics, I'm also going to be asking him about the Indian economy and India's relationship with the world right now, which is changing because of his expertise in both the finance and the external affairs ministries. Mr. Sinha, good evening, and thank you for giving me time.
Thank you, Faye. It's good to connect with you after some time. And I'm happy to be on your program to be able to answer questions that you might pose to me.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. You have spoken extensively about your reason to join the TMC. You've talked about the fact, if I'm not mistaken, that you believe that the battle for Bengal right now as a state election will have a larger bearing on the rest of the country. Would it be fair to interpret this as you're joining the TMC in an attempt to arrest the BJP's movement into one more state?
I'll go into a little background.
Please go ahead.
To support what I had said in Kolkata. And that is that, at least 3 international agencies have recently come out with a report in which they have said that, in India, democracy is now diminished and we have an elected autocracy. I have been thinking about these things for a while. That's one of the reasons why I decided to sever my relationship with the BJP 3 years ago. But in these 3 years, these dangers have multiplied. And we are really today victims of an elected autocracy. This has to be fought. This tendency has to be nipped in the bud as quickly as possible. That is one part. The second part is that there are elections taking place in 5 states in this country. These are state-level elections. These are not national elections. But it is the BJP which has made the Bengal election an election of national importance, not Mamta Banerjee. It's the BJP which has done it. And because the BJP has done it, therefore I thought that I should join the fight for democracy in Bengal, and who will be putting up resistance to BJP in Bengal? Obviously TMC under Mamta Banerjee. So it was therefore logical for me to join her party, strengthen her hands, so that BJP is stopped in these elections and Mamta comes back to power.
Mr. Sinha, your arguments so far have been about the demerits of the BJP, but you haven't made any arguments about the merits of the TMC. The TMC has not been the most welcoming of criticism either in the state of Bengal. Do you believe, if we just look at Bengal and what's best for Bengal right now, do you believe the TMC is the best option for the administration of Bengal for the next 4 years?
There is none other. There is none other. We have to choose between what is available. We do not live in an ideal world. And politics is certainly not an ideal world. So therefore, who is going to offer a fight to the BJP in Bengal? It is obviously not the left and the Congress, though I'm glad they are in alliance. It's obviously Mamta Banerjee and her TMC. So therefore, that force has to be supported, and that force has to be ensured that that is the party which wins once again, and that BJP is stopped, because if BJP wins Bengal, then perhaps there is no stopping BJP elsewhere. and also in the national elections of 2024. And that will be a great threat to democracy in our country, because next time, if this combination of Modi and Shah wins, then that will be the end of democracy in our country.
So effectively, you believe that if the BJP wins Bengal, it's it's a given that it will also win the next national elections in 2023.
It will have a tremendous impact on the national elections of 2024 because of the hype that BJP has created.
What role, we understand also, Mr. Sinha, that you are currently the vice president of the Trinamool Congress. What does that mean? What role are you playing in the campaign or the strategy or the day-to-day running of this party?
Well, they have given me a post, and I'm grateful to them for this. They have taken my joining their party quite seriously. And they have given me a lot of respect, including Mamta Banerjee. I returned to Delhi after I joined the party. And then I'm waiting for further suggestions about my role. I hope it will be coming in a day or two. And I'll determine my future program accordingly. I mean, I'm prepared to play whatever role the party assigns to me in the coming days.
You also said in many of your interviews, Mr. Sinha, that the injury that Mamta Banerjee suffered when she was on the campaign trail in Nandigram was the turning point for you. It's been argued also that this was the failure of the state police, which was in charge of security. Why was this a turning point for you? Did you see this? And while the BJP has argued that this was not an attack, this was perhaps an accident, why was it a turning point for you?
Let's look at it like this. The moment this incident happened, the BJP rushed to proclaim that it was not an attack. They rushed to proclaim that Mamta Banerjee was pretending, that she was not even hurt. When she was treated in a Kolkata hospital, and the doctors would not lie, and her foot was put in a plaster, even then the BJP continued with this narrative that Mamta Banerjee is pretending. Now here is a lady who has been hurt. If Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister of India and was in direct contest in Bengal with Mamta's party, she would have immediately rung up the Chief Minister and sympathized with her. Did Mr. Modi as Prime Minister of India ring her up and inquire about it? No. Did Mr. Shah, the Home Minister, ring her up, inquire about it, empathize with her? No. These people do not know even these common courtesies. So that was the turning point, that they started making fun of the injury of Mamta Banerjee. And I said, this, enough was enough. And these forces have to be stopped in Bengal. Then I sent a text message to Derek O'Brien, their MP in Rajya Sabha. And things moved very fast. And within 2 days, I was in Kolkata and I joined the party. That's how it happened.
Mr. Sinha, you were a very strong, a member of the BJP of Mr. Vajpayee and Mr. Advani. You served as cabinet member many times over as minister. Do you believe, and I'm talking about all of the parties together at this point, do you believe that our political discourse has lost its dignity? Do you believe that the tone in which our politicians speak to each other or of each other or about each other doesn't have the same, perhaps, decorum that it did back in the day when you were serving?
There's a world of difference between the BJP of Mr. Vajpayee and the BJP of today. Mr. Vajpayee was a gentleman par excellence. He had spent many long years in national politics. He was aware of the strengths and weaknesses of our democracy. Most of all, he was a great Democrat himself. And therefore, working with him was a real pleasure. It is not so today. Look at the alliances as Mr. Vajpayee built, starting with Farooq Abdullah in Jammu and Kashmir, to Akali Dal in Punjab, to Shiv Sena in Maharashtra, to Anna DMK or DMK in Tamil Nadu, to Chandrababu Naidu in Andhra Pradesh, to Biju Janata Dal in Orissa, to Mamta Banerjee in Bengal, to Nitish Kumar in Bihar, to Assam Gan Parishad in Assam. He really built a national coalition based on national consensus. And that is why his government worked on national consensus. Now look at what these people have done. They have, what they have done is that they have, what they have done is they have given a go-by even to the oldest coalitions that the BJP had. Akali Dal in Punjab, Shiv Sena in Maharashtra. Why have these coalition partners drifted away from the BJP? Because today's BJP does not believe in consensus politics. It believes in confrontation. And whether friend or foe, it confronts everyone. And therefore, friends have left. And they are now alone, except for, I think, Nitish Kumar in Bihar. They don't have any ally anywhere.
But Mr. Sinha, it could be argued that with over 300 seats in parliament, that they don't need anyone.
No, that is one part, that you have 300 seats in parliament.
Yes.
But does it prevent them still from having coalition? Because they still fancy themselves as NDA, National Democratic Alliance. But there is no National Democratic Alliance in existence today. So if you, instead of 303 seats, you had more supporters in Lok Sabha and in Rajya Sabha, would that hurt you? No, that will not. But it does not represent, it would not represent the politics of confrontation. It will be politics of consensus in which Mr. Vajpayee believed and in which Mr. Modi does not believe.
Mr. Sinha, Mr. Modi came to power in 2014 on a clear agenda of development and of double-digit growth. We were talking about the ambition of the average Indian at that time. Do you believe that that development agenda is on track or still intact?
Completely derailed, Faye. It's completely derailed. And let's not talk about the last 4 quarters when COVID overtook us. But look at the previous 2 years. Before COVID, there were 8 quarters in which our growth rate has consistently come down. And it has come down from something like 8% to something like 4%. This is pre-COVID, and 2 years is a long time. Their policies have not align themselves with the changing situation, with the result that they have not worked, and the Indian economy is going down and down. So far from fulfilling the promises that they made, they have taken the country downhill as far as the economy is concerned, and now they are trying to put all the blame on COVID. That is not washing with the people. And then, public memory is short, but look at the devastation that demonetization caused to the economy. Does anyone talk about demonetization anymore? Is anyone holding the Prime Minister accountable? Holding him to the words that he had uttered in Goa? So there you are. They are, this is my feeling, they are depending on the fact that public memory is short and that they will forget everything. Public memory is short, but they're not going to forget the pain, for instance, of the rise of this GDP, as I've said, gas, diesel, petrol. Why have they gone up? The government has made 7 lakh crore rupees through taxes in addition. This is additional taxation on petroleum products. And who is paying for it? The people of this country are paying for it. So this government is, what is it doing? Extortionist. It's become an extortionist.
But Mr. Sinha, on that very point, and I'm glad you brought it up, you tweeted not long ago, and I'm quoting your tweet, you said, the government is making filthy amounts of money while people suffer and the opposition is sleeping. But the government has argued two things. One, that this has to do with international prices because petrol prices have been deregulated. They've also argued that the government needs the money right now, needs the revenue right now to fight COVID and to spend in order to revive the economy. Where else is that money going to come from? Because businesses that are not making money cannot pay taxes. Individuals who are not making money cannot pay taxes. Also, I want to point out at this point for our audience, if they don't know, it was back in 2002 with the Vajpayee government, where Mr. Sinha was the finance minister, that the prices of petrol and diesel were deregulated. And the movement of deregulation began at that time under your, under your watch as finance minister. So do you buy the arguments put forward by the government that we need to raise the money? How else will we revive the economy?
So let me give you the reply point-wise. Yes, it's true that when I was finance minister, we deregulated the petroleum sector. We wanted the prices to be market determined. But at the same time, it was also the understanding that if, let's say, international crude prices went up beyond tolerance limits, then the burden of that will be distributed three ways. And the three stakeholders were Government of India, which will take a tax cut, the petroleum companies, which will have to bear losses, and the consumer, who will pay a little higher price. That is point number one. This is not happening today. The entire burden in one stakeholder, and that is the consumer. The second point is that you talked about deregulation. Yes. Have you seen in recent days, now that elections are taking place in 5 states, any increase in petroleum prices? No, because the government is controlling the petroleum companies. And they have told them that as long as the elections are on, don't increase petroleum prices. And they have no other way except to listen to the government, obey its orders. The third point which I'd like to make is with regard to international crude oil prices. International crude oil prices are not the Brent crude that we buy. They're not at $120, $140 a barrel. They are at around 40. So there has not been an exponential increase in international crude oil prices, and it does not warrant the kind of extortion in which this government is indulging. I told you that compared to 2013-14, the additional amount which has been collected by this government is through taxation on petroleum products is around 7 lakh crore rupees, which is nothing but extortion. So they have not followed any formula. Their international crude prices is a joke. Now coming to the last point that you made, the government's argument that we need money. Of course, every government needs money. Who said the government does not need money? But let me ask you a counter question. Have you seen any economy in government expenditure? Have you seen any economy measures being taken? Have you seen posts being reduced? Nothing. There is no control over expenditure. On the other hand, the government is saying, look, this is what our expenditure is, and it's not all related to fighting COVID.
Mr. Sinha, the GDP numbers right now, and we had our RBI governor speak, in fact, just today, where he said that the only way for the economy to move now is upwards because the worst is behind us. That we are out now, we're back in positive territory from the negative territory that we had seen, like you said, because of COVID. Would you say the government has handled the revival of the economy well, or do you think at this point that the unemployment numbers and the what we traditionally call mehgai in our kitchen budgets are concerns for you right now?
No, the growth rate has gone down. It's gone into negative territory, and it has got. If it has gone into negative territory, then RBI governor is right, it can only go up. So perhaps it will go up. There will be a less negative growth rate, or it might even turn positive marginally. The other point that I'm making to you is that, even before the advent of COVID, why was the economy going down? Why did the growth rate come down from 8% to 4%? Because demand in the economy has contracted. People are just not consuming. Fresh investments are not taking place. And therefore, the growth rate of the economy is going down. Now, government has come out with two, what is it called? What package?
Stimulus packages. The announcement.
Stimulus packages they have come out, which is together 42 lakh crore rupees. 42 lakh crore. Have you seen any impact of that on our economy? Absolutely none, because that was all eyewash. And this is where I'd like to make this point, that this government believes in media management. It believes in controlling the headlines. It believes in befooling the people. And it thinks it will ride whatever discontent is there or disaffection is there by merely managing the Godi media. That's not going to help, because the people are feeling the pinch.
Mr. Sinha, you've come out quite publicly in your support for the farmers that are currently in protest. But if we look at this purely from a government expenditure or an economic point of view, the government has made it clear to the Supreme Court that MSP, which is one of the demands of the farmers, is not economically viable. On that one particular point of MSP, do you agree with the government or the farmers?
I am with the farmers for the very simple reason that MSP has been a long-established tradition in our country. And you have an independent agency like the Bureau of Costs and Prices, BICP, which is responsible for determining what is the cost of production in agriculture. And that is the baseline on which MSP is determined. So this system has been working fairly well all these years. Sometimes you may be raising MSP by reasonably high rates, or you may not give them higher rates, but the system has been there all the time. Now, as far as the farmers are concerned, let's not merely confine their disaffection to MSP. These three farm laws, which they call the death knell of farming in India, have you studied the manner in which they were passed? First, they were promulgated as ordinances, completely uncalled for, because farming issues and farming problems did not arise suddenly, and there was no need for an ordinance. So they passed it first as ordinances, then you know what happened in Rajya Sabha. It did not go to the Standing Committee of Parliament. In fact, you might be aware, may not be aware, that in the first 5 years of this government, NDA 2, they sent only 25% of the legislations to the Standing Committee, compared to 71% during the 10-year rule of the UPA. And in the last 2 years, they have not sent a single legislation, including these farm laws, to the standing committees. So parliamentary functioning also has been completely constricted because of this attitude of the government. What does a standing committee do, as you know? It calls all the stakeholders. Now, if we had gone through that process and the farmers had been called, their representatives had been called by the standing committee, then the stakeholders' opinions would have been taken. And then suggestions would have made with regard to the amendment in the original bill. None of this happened. I mean, this government thinks that nobody else has any brains except they themselves. A couple of people in government have all the brains, and they will do pretty much as they like. This is not going to work in our democracy. And the farmers' agitation is proof of that.
Mr. Sinha, you also tweeted about the farmers' agitation. You said the farmers' movement is our internal affair. We are quite competent to sort things out. I'm 100% with the farmers, but I'm not in favor of outsiders inferring in our internal matters. So,
Yeah.
would you explain this to me, please?
Yes. The word would perhaps been interfering in our internal matters.
Yes, I beg your pardon.
Yeah. So let's say there is this agitation, there could be another agitation, there have been agitations in the past. In a democracy, agitations will take place. Difference of opinion will exist. But for any other parliament, for any other government to jump into it and say this is right, this is wrong, that is unwarranted. And I was in my tweet protesting against governmental interference from outside. Public bodies have they can express an opinion. Like I said, democracy in our country has been diminished, and that's the report of 3 different agencies.
Yes.
But the governments should not interfere and start teaching us.
Fair enough. Coming to the point of these now public bodies that have downgraded India's level of freedom, this is specifically to do with US-based think tank Freedom House that has taken us from free to partially free. The Ministry of External Affairs has responded in a very sharp statement and said that this is misleading, incorrect, and misplaced. And the Minister of External Affairs said that we no longer are seeking the approval of Western voices. To paraphrase what he said, what is your response to the, to the government's reaction? Should it have been introspection instead of this sort of batting it back?
My response is very clear on this. As I said a little while ago, I would not like foreign governments to interfere in our internal affairs, but foreign NGOs, foreign bodies have all the right to comment on what's happening in our country. So I'm not disputing that. The second important point which I'd like to make is that we start patting ourselves on the back, Faye, when something good is said about us. Who has sought the greatest approval from abroad for himself? It is Prime Minister Modi. He is unfortunately not been able to go abroad for the last 12 months because of COVID, but he's the one who was making trips abroad and was covered on live media in the country, was addressing NRIs, and this, that, and the other, whatnot. All the time, his audience was domestic audience. And we were reveling in that. Oh, what a great thing, what a great Prime Minister. But now that you are facing criticism, you're saying that they have no right to criticize. So what that means is that I am prepared to take your praise, but I am not prepared to take your criticism. These dual standards will not work.
Mr. Sinha, also to do with our relationship with China, in the last 1 year, several things have changed in our relationship with China, and also with the new government coming in to the US. We understand that many countries now want to form, led by the US, an anti-China bloc. I want to understand from you, first of all, do you believe that our government could have dealt with China differently? Because again, you have criticized the government's handling of the situation with China in Ladakh quite publicly. What should the government have done differently, in your opinion?
Government should tell the truth, even now, to the people. The people of this country have a right to know the truth. The government should not be speaking untruth all the time. Now, what did the Prime Minister say about Ladakh? Nobody entered our territory, nobody is sitting in our territory. Na koi ghusa, na ghusa hai. Okay? That was a complete untruth that he uttered. Have we held him responsible for it? Second, the defense minister said that the Chinese have vacated all the areas that they had occupied, which is not true. We know that in Chushul and in Heights and in Depsang, they have entered our territory and they have not vacated. The truce, the understanding that we have reached with the Chinese is only confined to the Pangong Lake area. There was recently a certain Commander Davidson, who is perhaps the Pacific commander of Indo-Pacific commander of US forces, he was deposing before the US Senate Armed Forces Committee. And there he said that the Chinese have not vacated many areas that they had occupied in the present conflict, which started last year. Now, who is lying? Who is telling the untruth? Is our government telling the untruth, or that commander is misleading the US Senate? Everyone who is aware of the situation believes that the Chinese have not withdrawn. They continue to occupy many areas which are our territory. But the government is not taking the people into confidence, just as it did not take the people into confidence about Doklam.
Mr. Sinha, also, we've now, in the last few months, with what is called our vaccine diplomacy, because India has supplied doses of vaccine to most of our neighbors in South Asia. Would you say that this was a smart way to turn the neighborhood to India away from China? Because it's really a question of who gets to lead in this neighborhood. How would you rate India's vaccine diplomacy?
Much has been made of this vaccine diplomacy. The point is that India has been the pharmacy of the world for quite some time. We have been the most important suppliers of pharmaceutical products, especially to the developing countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. I remember 20 years ago when I was in the External Affairs Ministry, whenever I used to go abroad and I used to talk to my counterparts, I used to promote Indian pharmaceutical products. And Indian pharmaceutical products were selling abroad even at that time. Now we have a new situation. We have COVID. Our scientists have done a great job. They have come out with COVID vaccine. And we are following the same path and supplying COVID vaccine to many countries. But as is the wont of this government, everything is made as if this is happening for the first time and it's happening because of initiative of Mr. Modi. Good that we are supplying vaccines to the developing countries. We should continue to do that because they believe in us. They believe in our capacity.
What is your response to the Quad meeting that was held as well? Does it elevate India's position, in our, let's say, conflict with China, for want of better words?
Quad is fine, but I would not like Quad to emerge as a counterweight to China, in the sense that if we have problems with the Chinese, we should be able to deal with it ourselves. Suppose tomorrow there is a Quad vis-a-vis Pakistan, shall we welcome it? Why are we involving multilateral organizations in our bilateral issues? Our consistent policy has been that if there is a policy issue with our neighbor, including Pakistan, we will deal with it bilaterally. Now we have gone back on that and we are getting involved in Quad. Now let Quad be discussing vaccination against COVID, let Quad be discussing economic progress, let Quad be discussing many other things. But if Quad emerges as a counterweight to China, which India is a part, then I would say that we are departing from long-established policy that we have followed in foreign policy.
Mr. Sinha, back in 1998, you presented a union budget, which was called the Swadeshi or the Self-reliance budget, where you talked about the fact that India has to be strong and self-reliant. Cut to today, where we're talking about an Atmanirbhar Bharat, also because we don't want to be as reliant on China for all of the things that we rely on China for. Do you believe that we have the ability right now to really be Atmanirbhar from China? Is our economy strong enough to actually pull that off? How long will that take us?
It will take us quite a long time. The way we allow China to come in, we allow China to export its products to India, make investments in India. China is, taken over many areas of our economy. And to disentangle from that will take time. I have always been worried about the huge trade deficit that we run with China. It should not be that way. We should have taken steps to balance it more properly. But over the years, that has not happened. But, I'll go back to another point. And that is that as far as China is concerned, except for the conflict in Ladakh, nothing else has changed. And you'll recall Mr. Modi's repeated meetings with the Chinese President Xi. What was he trying to do? He was trying to cultivate the Chinese. And we have received a huge rebuff from China. We should never put ourselves in that position. Whether it's China or the US or Japan or the European Union, I have always believed that we should deal with any country or bloc of countries on the basis of equality and sovereignty. So China might be way ahead of us in certain areas, but we should not therefore bow down before China and forget the concept of equality. We are a sovereign nation, we are a proud nation, and we should deal with China accordingly.
Mr. Sinha, if you were to give advice to the government right now, whether or not they seek it or take that advice, what would that be?
I decided some years ago that I'll give no advice to this government, because in the initial phases of this government, I wrote letters to the Prime Minister, made many suggestions. You'll be surprised if I told you that the Prime Minister did not even respond to those suggestions. Then I started taking interest in the affairs of Jammu and Kashmir, and I made many trips to Srinagar, talked to various people there, and I wanted to tell the government what our findings were. But the government was most reluctant to receive that advice. So there is so much evidence that my advice is not welcome. And therefore, I don't want to waste my advice, especially through a YouTube channel.
All right, Mr. Sinha, thank you so much for speaking with us and giving us your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.